All right, welcome. Um, right now, you guys are at a very interesting point because you know all the JavaScript that you need to know in order to start to work with the internet. And a big thing that you've gotten very good at is working with JSON or JavaScript object notation. Your third unit here, you've become very skilled at parsing big big arrays of data that look like this, and that's what JSON looks like. But let's say this: if you all were coding JSON last assignment, I give you a lot of props. I find that JSON is I don't want to say scary because that sounds, but I have spent several days in a row in the past simply trying to get a string like this written correctly. And let me say that every time you receive a notification over your phone, you're getting a package that looks just like this. So let me say that this is a big time operation working with JSON, but it's going to be very rare in your career that you're going to write data like this. The data that you're going to be getting is going to be rolling over the internet. And here's a little example. I'm making a query against, and not in this one, rather, this one. I'm making a query against the database over in Virginia. And these are the results. And you can see that the structure of the page is extremely similar to what you've been writing thus far. But you don't have the JSON, and now this is using the Amazon Web Services API, but you don't have the JSON that you guys have provided. Instead, the JSON is coming off the cloud, and the JSON is moving back to your client wherever you are. And so that's a really cool paradigm that that your generation is going to take advantage of. This is more secure than PHP. It's more secure than Java Server Pages. It's harder to break than ASP.NET. So in a class like ours, where there's a lot of security professionals, they're going to be interested in why that's the case and why very forward-looking organizations are adopting this. And therefore, in a year or so, the mid-tier organizations will adopt it. And then in a number of years, the slower organizations will adopt it. But right now, people need to feel like they're secure and that they're also getting content over the cloud. So let's just take it a step at a time and say that you're in a good place. And maybe what you do is you check out this video a couple of times and allow yourself to be a scholar. Don't feel pressure to code. Feel pressure to study and read and acquaint yourself. You'll find that programming is much more about reading about the language because the language is ultimately very simple. And you also have tons of code that you can use here. So you guys have a huge safety net, but it will be largely about understanding all the little steps. Like, for example, if you leave this line out, it won't work, right? And so, oh, well, I forgot that. Okay. And, copying this and then pasting it won't do any good. You'll need to use each of these. So I want to give you permission to slow down, be the tea drinking, like, scholar with robes on, like walking around discussing the architecture of the internet, walking around the garden, like living a scholarly life, not feeling like you need to just, waste a lot of energy like stressfully plugging code in and seeing if it works. That's the wrong lifestyle. Like, you guys need to slow it down. So as you can see, there's a lot happening here. And one of the big building blocks is the fact that we're using Amazon Web Services. If you use Netflix, if you watch Netflix today, if you use Siri on an iPhone, if you use the website that was made in the past 7 years, or played a video game over the internet, it's likely that you used Amazon Web Services for several hours already today. And it's not necessary for all businesses to divulge what their hosting provider is. It's in their best interest not to. But the fact that the CIA asked Amazon Web Services to come over and install a version of Amazon Web Services inside the CIA to run their cloud means that you're using the same stuff that the CIA uses. Now, the CIA doesn't run their data sets on Amazon, but many of the branches of the Department of Defense do inside of what's called the Mil Cloud. So what I recommend here, and let me just log out and bring you to the first step. Your first step is going aws.amazon.com. And I've had the luxury of watching Amazon kind of sprout up in the high scalability world. I think I was fresh out of grad school and I was kind of working in my first startup environment, and I was having to build out the data center, and that's hard, especially when you have to work from open source. And so as a developer, I was saying, well, if I'm responsible for the network as well as the application, I really want to be in that position. I'm motivated by that, but let's just say that the time that I was graduating in 2006, that was literally the last year that any good developer was thinking about those two things. 2007 came around, Amazon Web Services started to come around, and people were interested because it would take me just tens of thousands of dollars per month to own that infrastructure and then put code on top of it. And then I would need to apply, other people at, to double or triple that rate just to physically secure the location. And I was thinking, well, I don't want to host this business in my house. And so I was literally like, oh, do I need to stock up on ammo? And how do I get to sleep at night when my company is running? How do I? And the truth of it is that IT people, especially developers, had been having 3-hour-a-night sleeps, needing to live within 2 minutes of their business, spending all of their income on rent so that they could live nearby, especially in Southern California where, rent is high. And that was a very strange position we found ourselves in for a long time. So when the arrival of Amazon came in, it was a big deal, and we paid a lot of attention. So for those of us who kind of adopted early, we've enjoyed watching the growth of AWS. But if you take a look at all the products that are available now on Amazon, there are so many of them, and this has a cool, and what I saw this morning is I would touch this, and there are so many products that run within Amazon. There's an entire universe of IT systems that you can lease. And so what we're finding is that, yes, General Motors bought a $250 million cloud facility to house in Michigan. I believe that some of the top industrial giants who see a $250 million as just, that's just the cost of doing business, those folks will continue to adopt first-rate clouds of their own. I believe that GM has so much sensitive intellectual property, they just simply do not want the CAD/CAM designs for the next Chevy Malibu to escape into anybody else's hands. Let me say, though, that within AWS, there is the Mil Cloud, where the Department of Defense, where DoD runs much of their IT. And that Mil Cloud works through Amazon Web Services. So what I have to say to you in all humility is that if it's good enough for the Navy, it's good enough for you. Don't you want to code with what the Air Force codes with? Don't you want to do what Netflix does? And let me say that if you plan to interview for developer positions in places like Santa Monica or San Francisco, it's all going to be Amazon Web Services. Everybody's made that move. And what we're finding is that bigger corporations are making that move too, especially if they're among the 2,000 odd corporations last year who were hacked, had customer data stolen, had some hole in their security profile located. Let's just say this. Big corporations for the first time have come to Silicon Valley consultants and said, look, we don't want to run our IT anymore. It's like they've been beaten so much that they don't want to run their own systems. And it's shocking because IT are the warriors. They do things, they keep systems alive. That's what they do. And so for big corporations to say, nope, we lost 10% of our shareholder equity in a hack attack last year, we're not doing that again, just get rid of it. Suddenly the business people are taking control of the IT, and they're not allowing the IT admins the authority that they've had for years, where whatever the IT admins say, just do it. Just give them all the toys they ask for, get out of their way. The IT admins have been sidestepped by these developers who go up to the MBAs and say, hey, look, your old infrastructure is why you got hacked. It's just not, it's fundamentally insecure. It's like building a skyscraper on a swamp. It's going to be dangerous for the rest of your life. And a smart business person strips it out and does what the developer says, because ultimately the developer is the person who owns the product that matters the most. Having a customer-facing system, if you're in eSurance, that interface, the customer response, the security, that's the product. The network is not a product. It's a means to an end. So that's where things stand. So what we're looking at right now, and Amazon is a business that grows a couple of $1 billion every quarter at this point. It's its own IT company within Amazon, but there are so many customer stories that are happening on top of AWS right now that, these are Dow Jones, Expedia, Novartis, biotech. It's kind of ridiculous. And now we're seeing whole universities just foregoing their IT and just gradually pushing all of their applications onto AWS. So I need to prepare you for that world where during your background, you're going to learn a lot of traditional infrastructure. You're going to learn some new infrastructure, software-defined networking, hopefully. And then you need to understand this, because whole corporations don't care about, it's not about who can spend the most. It's about who can spend the least and who can stay the most secure by spending the least. And that the management will listen to those people at this point. So you need to be able to play all of those angles. So my personal belief is that within a short amount of time, the techniques that you're using in this class will become the de facto standard, and your value will just be radically higher because you are already knowledgeable. And you will be able to go in and visit with top flight firms because they're doing things the same way that you're doing things. Okay, I've been in this business long enough. That's how I teach. It doesn't matter if I teach you something that's been deprecated for 5 years. That's a death sentence for students. They need to be learning. They need to be following the ball, not learning something that is not secure. Does that make sense? Like, for example, PHP. Everybody loves PHP. I've never met a person who disparages PHP. We all love PHP. There's about 8 people on Earth who maintain the PHP kernel. There's been massive disagreements within the PHP community in the past about the security of PHP. It went unpatched for a long time. And that's just because those 8 developers are so sought after that no one would want to divulge the cracks within the PHP edifice. And so finally those things were patched. That's great, but you don't want to chase a skill set that ultimately makes products that are vulnerable. That's not good. And that vulnerability persists throughout many environments, and that largely has to do with that Linux service, that Linux that you need to secure yourself. So there's these trade-offs. But fundamentally, I think what's great about AWS, and you all should feel like you should get an account at this point, is I've been signed into this thing for a while, so we'll get you an account in a moment. But I think that what students want really right now is to have a website right now, and they want to see data move over the internet right now, and they want to know that it's secure, and they want to have fun, and they want to work with the internet. And so this is the most cost-free way of doing that. Okay, so moving forward. Now, what you need to do is you need to get yourself an Amazon account, and I think mine has been logged in before, so it naturally knows that. So it's sort of saying, okay, get back to what you're doing. So I'm going to do that. And let's go here. You can see that I've been here for a while. I use the multi-factor authentication on my phone, but what I have a little pushback is that folks, they realize that get yourself an account, but they realize that Amazon wants you to supply a credit card. And they need that because they need to know who you are, and they need to know your identity. And if you have an existing Amazon account, they'll be happy to use that. That being said, before you resist me, let me say that you haven't had to buy a book yet, and that's good. So you've paid $0 for this class apart from tuition, and we're going to keep it that way. As long as you do what I say, you're not going to pay any money to Amazon. the good news is that Amazon for years has offered what's called the free tier. And let's go the AWS Free Tier, TIER. That's for young, new people like yourselves who want to try Amazon. And you want to get Amazon skills. And they give you a year of free usage within limits, right? And as long as you use the prescribed systems like these, and you'll use S3, you won't use EC2. So you'll have 5 gigabytes to use, 20,000 gets and puts. You know, you'll have a lot of free stuff. You'll never be billed for the use so long as you do what I ask. Now, let me say this. I have a lot of bright young hackers who move through my classes, and you can run up hundreds of dollars of expenses if you don't follow my instructions, and that's just life. You need to understand that. Your actions have consequences, and you're not allowed to fool around with stuff if you don't know what it means. Like, this is the same. You're going to be doing what the developers at Netflix every day do, which is to log onto their Amazon and begin work with their cloud. Okay? So understand that if you'd like to leave my class and go into Netflix, you're in a position to do so. But that's because you've learned what to do and what not to do. You know, it's like living on a ship. Like, please don't go too close to the edge when it's really high seas. You might, you know, watch like Most Dangerous Catch. You know, like you could fall off. Okay, like you could be charged 30 cents. You know, I had a student who ran up $266 in expenses, and that's the only time it's ever happened. But this young person really needed to learn that. You know, he's really a Ferrari of a young person, and he really needed to peel out in the driveway. And what I did is I called up Amazon, and I had him alleviate the charges. And they were like, aha, happens every day, crazy kid. Here, get out of here. Slap on the back of the head. And they took away the charges. I'm not saying they're going to do that for you, but what I want you to do, A, is supply a credit card. That gives them some identity verification that you're you, and that you'll be accountable. B, don't worry, you're not going to ring up any charges so long as you do what we ask you to do. C, the danger of you doing something wrong is 0. Okay? Don't even worry about it. All right, it's been said. So get yourself a free tier, and I'm going to jump in. You can do that when I'm done with this lecture. My job is to cover material, but you know, you should feel free to, you know, take 15 minutes, get yourself an account. I wouldn't be surprised if you get your account in, you know, in a minute. But what I need to do is I need to give you enough concepts that you can migrate. Now, once you get into Amazon, you realize that there really are dozens of very important services here. If you go on over to SNS, well, that's how you write notifications for your mobile app. If you do work docs and work mail, well, that's how you run a company, you know, for your users, so that you can keep, you know, work docs there. IAM is how you keep it secure. You're going to use that. DynamoDB, that's how you do world-class scalable databases. You're going to work with that. S3, well, that's how you do a photo upload. So let's say you have a photo sharing site and you want to upload your photos. S3 is also the most important part of Amazon for web developers, because now you can put your JavaScript right into S3 and run S3 like a web page. EC2 is where you choose a server type, like a Linux instance, and you can boot up a whole server farm, you know, in a couple minutes. And you can choose how much hardware you want to run right there. You know, so there's a lot of freedom right there. You know, a lot of depth. And as you can see, there's still lots of things happening here. GameLift, that's where, you know, game developers go and build out their server infrastructure. Website touched it. So what they do is within each of these pages, like going over to S3. S3 is a really great system. Now, what they like to do when it's the first time that you're using your services is you can get best practices. And they always change this, so I'm literally going to just go over here because I want to see what happens. But last time I logged into Amazon, they kind of wanted to ask me, this is their trusted advisor, they kind of wanted to evaluate my configuration. So let's do this. Let's go on. Oh, this is what I want to say. Okay. this is the opening. It's kind of bewildering. If you go down a little bit, this is what's awesome. They say build a solution. I want you to try this out to host a static website. That's a biggie. In 5 minutes, you'll have your own website. Now, they actually give you a much cooler website than what I'm going to give you. But if you want to register your own domain, this is the way to do it. And you might spend $4, get your own domain, get your, Brian Lugo is an awesome person despite his Bernie Sanders leanings .com. You know what I'm saying? Or like I am a good person.com, or like I like brianlugo.com, because maybe you can get an email that will be like, hi, I'm Brian at brianlugo.com. And it's like when you're, and that's and maybe you go Brian Lugo, I'm sorry to use your name on the internet, but Brian Lugo Smith .us, because that'll cost $3 instead of $5. And that .us is like Go America. Like anybody who makes a .us domain can have, we can be friends, you're just a nice kid. You grew up right. But let's say you use that domain between now and when you graduate. And when it's time to graduate, you sit down, you do an interview, and you keep on putting new assets into that webpage. Over the course of 2 years, people will have so much to look at, and they will know exactly what they're getting if all this quality stuff is there. And they just feel like they will talk to a little mini-me, like a little developer. I don't mean little, but somebody who's gonna be big in a couple of years. And let me say this, right now, 2017, the beginning of, this presidential era, in 3 years after you graduate, you could be making 6 figures. Like there's just nothing that prevents you from doing that, if you're a developer. The need for developers way outpaces the supply. We're not making a lot of those people. We're not making enough people who feel good about coding. We certainly don't make enough mathematicians, so being a programmer is one of the top 4 most lucrative professions, next to petrochemical engineering, chemical engineering. You got computer science and math, which is what you're doing here. And then I forget what else. Oh, pharmaceutical engineering. So you can make drugs, you can make oil, you can make plastic, or you can make software. Those people make the most. So I think that if you just take a lot of time, just take it slow, and just allow yourself to learn some stuff, you're positioning yourself for, an $80,000 job right out of the gate. That's good. Okay, so I want you to say, so new website, and this is what, what's my website going to be? You can either upload a website, or you can drop in some code, or you can create your website. And then this is kind of the architecture that they're going to use, where the S3 is scalable storage service, S3, right, S cubed. And that's where all your code is going to go. So your .html files and your .js are going to go up there, any images you have. CloudFront will offer a scalability. So they will make several copies of what's called your bucket, or they'll make several copies of all the files, and they will distribute that throughout the world in different cities. So a copy of your website goes to Sao Paulo. A copy of your website goes to Ohio. A copy of your website goes to Northern California. And they go out to what are called edge locations. So when people access your website over the local internet, the local loop will go to the nearest cached copy and will give them high performance. And let me say this, coming at this business, in 2006, I didn't have the ability to create data centers in Brazil and secure them with, military grade firearms. Does that make that, which is what you got to do if you want to safeguard your data? Like someone is guarding your data with a firearm right now. They don't want people to steal your data. Facebook operates out of a bunker in Virginia. Like Facebook worries about like biochemical attacks. Okay, out in the desert, eBay is cooking away. They got a mile radius around it. They have shooters on the top of, this is business. Like there's a security element. So it would be hard for you as niceperson.com to make global secure delivery. Does that make sense? So this is a fun way to do it. Let me say this, if you like this diagram, I really recommend that you indulge so-called Cloudcraft. This is a really, I mean, you've heard of Visio, and what happens here is you can make a diagram of your cloud, and hopefully, oh great, I just signed in, and that's cool. But you make these incredible, like, it looks like World of Warcraft in the cloud, and you can like move your, author your server, and it'll give you a sense of what it'll give you a sense of what it'll cost, and you can drag your cool asset out there and move it around a little bit. And we'll get more into Cloudcraft as we go. This is a fairly good representation. And now Route 53 is the DNS, or the domain name service, that Amazon uses when you say to Amazon, hey, Amazon, I want to host my website here in S3, and I want to call it brianandbernie.com. I'm kidding. If we like you, that means we give you brutal, harsh, that's wear it like a badge of honor. brianandbernie.com, or like bernielives.edu or something, and then you put it in there, and many of my students are right there. Okay, so so let's say that you want to, whenever somebody types in bernielives.edu, you want this content to show up. But bernielives.edu has to be registered here within the DNS in order for the internet to know the static IP address of the server block that is hosting this, which is curious because Amazon is a cloud. The very premise of the cloud is that there are thousands of little shoebox-sized computers that you are leasing, and none of your content is in one place. It's balanced across multiple servers. And so if you employ CloudFront, well, you quadruple, you octo size that, so you have copies of your stuff across different places that are also running clouds there. So it's very hard to crash an S3 bucket. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that. But Route 53 is what a lot of students are interested in. You don't have to use it here, but if you want to have bernierules.gov, then that name may be valuable to you, may be a big motivator for you. And buy that for US, buy it for $3 and do it. Now, let me back up here. I made one for a student group here, and we'll be doing more with that. But that's just a way to kind of have an awesome experience. What I want to teach you how to do is have a very simple experience. And the more technical user should avoid the walkthrough and should proceed right to S3. So let's go in here. Now, these are what are called buckets. This is a bucket, and I have lots of .html files in here. You notice that they mirror the files that I have up here on my GitHub because I want to push these files into the cloud. Now, what I can do here is, and I want to try to size this in a smart way. My Mac is a mere mortal. But each of these buckets are technically a HTTP endpoint. Now, each of these buckets, there may be 12 copies of this bucket, depending upon how big it is. I don't have access to those copies. All I know is I have access to these little bit of files, and I can upload something there, right? I can add a file, and I'll do that in a moment. But really what this is, it's a web server. And so if you go into the properties element, what's happened here is I have set up the static website hosting. So I've said enable website hosting. Here's the what's called document root, or the leading page that you see when you migrate there. That's the opening page. And that's all you need to do. You go save. Now, an important element within the S3 bucket is that you have what's called a CORS configuration, which you need to duplicate here. And I will give you a link that will give you some code that you can use here. Basically, CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. And it means that we can put the code inside of this bucket, and it will still work even though it's using several servers with different domains to move content to your browser. Now your browser needs to know if code from a third party is arriving, and that offends the same origin policy. So you actually need to tell your server or your bucket, hey, permit for content to come from multiple domains when you do a request. And these are the HTTP methods. HTTP has about 8 different methods to move, files or get or post across the internet, or put stuff across the internet. So it allows these 4 HTTP methods. So more on that later, but that's the core of the bucket. So you can create a bucket, give it a name. I like to put everything in Oregon because it's cheap. Don't set up logging because it will write lots of new data there based on all the requests, and it will fill up your bucket with logging, which is more than what you need. And then you go create, and then you get a bucket like this, and you name it what you like, and then go into your edit cores. You're going to add this, and I'm going to give you that code, and then enable the static website hosting. Now you're kind of like, well, if you've been through very traditional web development, and you're lucky if you have, with PHP or Java, or you're a part of a student group that does a lot with IT, you're used to having that Linux Apache thing where Apache is a very specific, probably the greatest, Linux service. Every website depends upon Apache. And you're like, well, the reason why we have Apache, if you go over to the Apache Foundation, which now is sprawling and has, awesomeness across it. But Apache was named this way based upon the early Apache web server. And Apache was available, now there are hundreds of servers, hundreds of projects on Apache, because Apache is like the core of software engineering for Java and others. But initially, Apache wasn't Apache. It was Apache. And now, we don't really talk about Apache as much because now it's been transitioned over. In the deep history of the internet, we were talking about Apache. That's what it was called. But now we have Apache. And it just has this incredible identity. And now that web server is the basis for all modern software engineering innovation. So Apache is a big deal. Now, let's just say if you're used to running your own services, you're used to Apache because you can drop your files into Apache, and then you can see them on the net, and that's a big deal. But the reason why is because Apache is skilled at doing HTTP and HTTPS traffic. So you can ask for Brian Lugo is a great guy .ca, .us, and then you'll see his lead page. But you're really asking for the document that is a document root at Brian Lugo is a nice guy.edu, and you want it over an HTTP channel. So that's a very important protocol within the internet. So for us who are migrating over to S3, A, you don't have the Linux server to manage. B, you don't have the Apache server to manage. C, you have the same incredible HTTP traffic that is really what we want. So if you really want to hack and hack and hack, I love you. You're just like me. That's how I got where I am. But for many of you, it doesn't reward you to do hacking on things that are already solved, because people really need you to re-architect the way that the business works. The business people are not engaged with the user experience. They want to help. They're incredibly helpful. But the developer is the one who makes the first move. And really the business people are there to either say, yeah, that was a great idea, or do it different, or no, that's a bad idea, don't do that. But business people are powerless without the developer making the product. So the faster the developer can get something done, the more excited the business people are, and the more they will rally around your product. So hacking and jiggering with Linux infrastructure is not going to impress anybody in a day and age where everybody has a website, everybody has a cloud. Sorry, you're going to get a cloud for free today. Why is that? Why is that special? So that value set needs to be there. The reason why I want to bring this up is you can see that this particular file inside of this particular bucket is available at this particular web address. And it begins with HTTPS. So you can be assured that assets that you host here in the bucket are available over HTTP and HTTPS. So very quickly, you guys have solved the HTTP protocol requirement of your website. You've done that quickly. Now we can get at, putting your content up there. So what I recommend is once you build up your bucket, you'll have your bucket very quickly. Go ahead and grab your JavaScript that you've worked hard on, and let me grab it out of my my GitHub. Let's say you got a bunch of files that you made. Get your website up there. Does that make sense? And so slowly, you're going to upload that, choose it. And let me choose all these. And these are going to go up there. And now I want to set the details. You got to do it. And just use the standard storage. You got to do it this way. And then here's the most important thing. You go make everything public. And those of you who've done a little Linux, done a little Apache, know that fundamentally Apache is a file system that is world readable, right? It's O. Everybody can read what's inside of that directory, and they can read it over HTTP sockets, over 43 or an 80 or an 8080. And so make everything public, and then you set the metadata, it sets it automatically, and then you start the upload, which I will not do. Then you press it, and then it will be public momentarily. Now, if you forget this, then it won't be visible. And then what you do, and I'm going to give you a chance to do this in a sec, is then you go here and you press it, and you're like, holy moly, now I'm public. Now I'm developing over the internet. No one can stop me. Now I'm a developer. Right? I just developed something. You can't stop me because now I got a website. Right? BernieLives.gov. Like republicofbernie.edu. So anyway, you guys know I'm having fun with you. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit this lecture, and I'm going to give you a chance to fool around with this and make your mistakes. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to go after some of the big animals, which is DynamoDB, and get you ready to do some database, right? All right.